My paper is pretty much a comparative study on the style, the lyrics, and the perception of gospel music in America from its origin to present day today, and what role Black gospel music played in its transformation. So, gospel's creation heavily relies on what African Americans had endured prior to the migration. It was African Americans who brought their common West African worship. This type of worship was referred to as spirituals. And according to Oxford Music, they defined spirituals as folk hymn that developed during the American religious revival. It included things like falsetto, religious dancing or shouting, improv, repetition, hand clapping, foot tapping, dynamic rhythms, and the call and response technique. This would slowly begin the evolution of gospel music. Creative outcome was a result of the internal struggles that the Black had been facing following the Great Migration. The Great Migration occurred during the early to mid 1900s when over 5 million African Americans relocated from the south of the United States to more northern areas. Their migration was due to the lack of financial opportunities and the strict segregation laws in the South. The Jim Crow laws were prominent in the South. They legalized segregation in several public areas such as schools, transportation, restrooms, and restaurants. This ignited social and physical danger for the African Americans. The Ku Klux Klan had been officially dismantled in prior years, but it was still continuing in private. Although they did receive more financial stability in the North, socially the North did not feel any more welcoming than the South. A great portion of the people that migrated arrived in the city of Chicago, Illinois, and upon arrival, most people had somewhere to go. They either already had a family member or friends in the city, so they sought out their address. But those who would come with no connections will be directed to the southern part of the city because the white people would assume that's where they belonged, in the ghetto. This area would then be referred to as the Black Belt by others. So ultimately, even without the strict segregation laws from the South, there was still a color division in the city of Chicago. This continued social outcast would ultimately bring the rise of gospel music in Chicago in the 1930s. To African Americans, gospel music served more purpose than just biblical and religious hymns. They were a form of freedom. They used it as a form of expression, as they often spoke their feelings in their songs. The lyrics were often uplifting, encouraging, and created some sort of message of hope. The music helped them embrace the new city but still hold on to their southern roots. The phrase gospel was first used in musical context by Philip Bliss and D. Sankey in the late 1800s. They wrote a book of over hundreds of songs entitled Gospel Hymns and Sacred Songs. At this time, gospel music was perceived to be exactly what Oxford's first definition states, a Protestant Christian hymnody. These hymns can be described as declarations of evangelism, influenced by popular era at the time, which was Romanticism. The lyricism of the gospel was heavily theological. It centered around believers' relationship with Christ. The musical style would range from devotional, forceful, to meditative. They were generally composed of four-line stanzas with alternative rhythm patterns above a piano or an organ. It was not until gospel was remade by the African Americans that they began to steer in a different direction stylistically. They began to stray from their original weighty musical style and transform it into something more light and joyous, while still keeping the theological context. The song I Know I've Got Religion by Golden Jubilee Quartet is a prime example of the beginning of that transition style. It was once an old spiritual that was changed and then performed by a quartet with a rocking backbeat that later was known to be the rhythm of blues. And as time progressed, so did society's perception of gospel music. The term Black gospel can now be found under the same umbrella as other gospel. Today, the gospel music genre encompasses almost every musical style as long as it has some theological context. Upon looking gospel music on a music database such as Billboard, you will receive a wide variety of musical styles, from contemporary rock, country, to jazz. As long as it has some sort of message about God, it is considered gospel. But in my further analysis, many gospel songs today do not have that strong theological context they once did. If you were to play a modern Christian song and ask people today if they considered it gospel, you would receive mixed responses. When people think of gospel music today, some still imagine a loud, joyous black choir singing from the top of their lungs. Although this at once was the prominent gospel in America, it is now broadened to encompass various musical styles. Although there has been a great transformation on the weight of theological context in the songs now, it was because of the African Americans' first stylistic transformation of gospel music that we have the variety we have today. African Americans' transformation of gospel music in the early 1900s greatly paved the route of change in terms of lyricism, style, and purpose of gospel music today. So that is a quick recap of what my essay was all about, and thank you for watching!